Hello, I'm Simon Whistler. You're watching Top 10's Net, and in the video today, the top 10 fanatical French villains that you should fear. Just before we get started, I do want to say that there's going to be a lot of French pronunciations in this video. I don't speak French, I look up the pronunciations, but when they're not available, I might get them wrong, so to any French speakers watching, I do apologize ahead of time. When we think of France, we tend to first imagine the romantic, the gastronomically exclusive, the luxurious, or the destination for classy European travel. When we imagine the atrocious and the wicked, our minds may initially jump to Henry VIII, Nazi Germany, or North American serial killers. Yet it is France where we find some of the highest, or should we say lowest, levels of villain, including the shockingly abusive Marquis de Sade, whose name is the origin of the word sadism itself. In this account, we explore these darkest and most surprising histories. Number 10. Marquis de Sade. His title is the very origin of the term sadism itself. Donatien Alphonse François, known as Marquis de Sade, was an aristocratic French abuser who was guilty of escalating confinement, humiliation, rape, and torture of young women in the name of twisted self-pleasure. Considered to be an author, philosopher, and a criminal, Sade combined some very dark concepts with even worse real-life decisions. Born in 1740 to a diplomat serving in the court of Louis XV and living 74 years until his death in 1814, throughout his sordid life and exploits, philosophical in his outlook, Sade was the person whose actions gave birth to the term sadistic. His behavior seems to have stemmed from aggressive predispositions as a child, including such outrageous behavior as beating the Prince of France and the horrendous whipping punishments he received in school for his conduct. Becoming obsessed with corporal punishment as an adult, he pursued increasingly violent encounters. In 1763, de Sade was married, but shortly later he began to rent rooms in which to fulfill his fantasies. His fantasies became increasingly strange as he incorporated crosses into an encounter with a prostitute and was arrested after she complained to the police. While imprisoned, he authored 15 manuscripts, including the well-known Justine and 120 Days of Sodom. He was soon released, but in 1768 he tortured a chambermaid with hot wax after bringing her to his room and first cutting her. She was paid off by the family to keep quiet, but eventually Sade was sent to Italy. At the time of the French Revolution, de Sade was welcomed into the new government, only to be put into an insane asylum during the reign of Napoleon Bonaparte. Still on his path, he pursued the 13-year-old daughter of an asylum employee before his eventual death. Number 9. Gilles de Rais. A colourful figure who at first might have recalled a dashing adventurer, the now maligned but relatively little-known French nobleman turned serial killer Gilles de Rais held positions of great privilege but fell to great depths. Depicted in shining armour with long dark hair, de Rais cast an impressive image. Born in 1404, he fought in the 100 Years' War and served as a comrade in arms of Joan d'Arc, distinguishing himself with his battle prowess and bravery. Yet there was a dark side, as this apparently respectable warrior appeared to be a predator capable of abusing and killing the most vulnerable in society. Becoming one of the most twisted abusers and all-around sickos in history, de Rais increased in power as concern over numerous children who had disappeared in the areas surrounding his personal castles developed. After Joan of Arc died in 1431, his time spent fighting was replaced with time spent on his large estates, engaging in extravagance. Extravagance eventually gave way to violence, sex crimes against children, and child murder. Rumours grew, and in the wake of constructing a chapel and selecting children for the choir, an activity followed by yet more disappearances, de Rais was caught and confessed to torturing and murdering over 100 children over a period of 10 years with the help of his noblemen. Executed by burning and hanging in 1440, de Rais is considered history's first recorded serial killer, and notably a serial killer of high social standing. Number 8. Michel Fourniret. Known as the Ogre of the Ardennes, Michel Fourniret stands out as one of the most brutal and bizarre serial killers in European history. Definitely unassuming in appearance, Fourniret had a rather nerdy, even scientist look to him. He had a high IQ, but had trouble holding jobs and was a human beast with a twisted tendency to engage in sexual abuse and later murder. His crimes were ultimately characterized by unbelievably strategic, premeditated brutality against young girls and women aged from 12 to 22. During his first marriage, he was convicted of child molestation and sent to prison. After marrying a second time, he was convicted of voyeurism and assault, and while in prison, Forneret met a woman who would become his third wife after putting an ad in a Catholic magazine. Monique Olivier, a nurse with 3 children, agreed to a horrendous pact where Forneret would kill her ex-husband if she were to help him lure virgin female victims. Upon release, the couple embarked on a path of sordid horror where they would go for long drives and then stop and ask potential young female victims for directions. With the help of his wife in luring the victims in, Monsieur Fournier lured, abused, and murdered several girls and women in both Belgium and France before being sentenced to life imprisonment. Number 7. Maximilien Robespierre. The French Revolution saw the unfolding of some of history's most twisted crimes against humanity, mass paranoia, and apparent psychopathic conduct. And the horrors that took place were not the result of decisions by faceless entities or random fights in the street. People with agendas and plans were behind the violence, and one of the most notorious would have to be the unassuming-looking Maximilien Robespierre. Born in Arras in 1758, the son of a lawyer, Robespierre studied in Paris and became a lawyer himself. After time in the Jacobean Club, where he served as president, Robespierre was elected first deputy for Paris to the National Convention. He then rose to power as the most influential member of the ironically named Committee of Public Safety, which would go on to commit some of the most unspeakable crimes against human rights in modern history. Perpetrating the Reign of Terror, the committee oversaw the ruthless and often crazed mass purge of anyone who might constitute the littlest amount of opposition to the revolution. Through his first-hand involvement in the Reign of Terror, the man with a gentle resting look but a wicked glance and a self-righteous smile saw violence as the answer to dominating those around him. In addition to the countless executions carried out under the bloody hands of this lawyer-turned-execution master, the Committee of Public Safety aggressively pushed the cult of the Supreme Being as a new religion for France. Eventually, Robespierre became unpopular due to the intensity of his violent campaign and his authoritarian nature. On July the 27th, 1794, Robespierre was himself guillotined along with 21 close compatriots. Number 6. René Descartes. To see the name of a famous philosopher and mathematician in this list of horror is surely a surprise. Yet while Descartes may not have set out to be wicked, his musings saw him arrive at conclusions that resulted in truly heinous outcomes. Believing living species of animals apart from humans were literal flesh robots, simply automatons as he called them, without any consciousness, thought or feeling, Descartes cut open live animals in brutal and horrendous fashions as scientific experiments. His work was conducted without anesthetic, convinced that he was causing no real and experienced harm to other beings. After all, he saw animals as organic life forms, but not as experiential beings. Born in 1596, Descartes believed that since animals are robots, they do not feel pain and are thus open for use in experimentation. The logic of Descartes was possibly supported by popular religious perceptions of humans as distinct from other species. While it is obvious that humans are just another species in the animal kingdom, and thus, while we are highly advanced, our physiology and psychology are shared with other species, many scientists viewed animals as robots during the 20th century. Concerningly, some 21st century scientists remain stuck in this illogical viewpoint. By considering how many Cartesian assumptions are held in regards to animal welfare, it is conceivable that more compassionate treatment of animals would accompany such reconsideration. Number 5. Marcel-André Henri Félix Pétion. During times of war, human rights abuse and chaos, some fight back or help. In a certain number of cases, though, chaos provides the perfect cover for opportunists, including deranged serial killers. An opportunist of the highest degree, Marcel-André Henri Félix Pétion was a doctor, a madman, and a killer of multitudes who took advantage of the Nazi occupation of France to unleash a scourge of vicious murders. Diagnosed as being mentally ill at the age of 14, Pétion, born in 1897 in Auxerre, served in World War I, but then apparently self-harmed in a very extreme way with a grenade. Eventually released from the hospital and discharged from the military with a disability pension, Pétion ambitiously embarked in a course of medical studies and became a doctor in 1921. Soon he began distributing drugs and stealing in town before starting a romance with a girl who soon disappeared for good. With the onset of World War II, the man who became nicknamed as Dr. Satan cemented his reputation as a notorious serial killer when he was found to have no less than 23 bodies stashed in his home. Many victims were killed after fleeing the Nazis and being offered inoculations by Dr. Petiot, which actually consisted of deadly doses of cyanide poison. Found guilty of murder, he was beheaded under the guillotine on May 25, 1946. Number 4. Jean Weber. The worst serial killers and violent offenders in history have not always been of the male gender, and this is no exception in the case of France and its villains. Born in 1874 in a western French village, Jean Weber was a monstrous predator and an apparently insane woman who killed at least 10 children in a horrific series of strangling incidents. What is especially shocking is the number of crimes that she was able to commit due to her being let go. Had more attention been paid to what was actually taking place, her mini reign of terror could have been sooner forestalled. Caught on repeated occasions, Weber was able to escape the consequences of several murders by having the deaths blamed on medical problems supposedly suffered by children and through legal assistance. In a series of ghastly incidents, Weber strangled children to death, including her own son and allegedly her 2 other children, or those either foolishly or ignorantly placed under her care. After causing a series of deaths and at times being caught in the act of strangling before she could kill the victim, the serial killer was finally caught for good. Her final victim was the son of an innkeeper whom Weber strangled with a blood-soaked handkerchief. Incarcerated in an insane asylum in 1908, Weber ultimately, ironically, strangled herself to death 10 years later. Number 3. Joseph Vacher. A bizarre mad killer known as the French Ripper, Joseph Vacher was a terrifying answer to England's notorious, albeit far more mysterious, Jack the Ripper. Born on a farm in the French Alps in 1869, Vacher was the youngest of 15 children born to poor parents. Joining the army at the age of 17, the young man was known for having a hot temper and a dose of what might be now called narcissism. Throughout his bizarre and violent life, Vacher committed a bizarre series of murders, targeting workers including teenage boys, teenage girls, and an adult woman, many of them shepherds. In carrying out these acts of horror, he earned himself the nickname the Killer of Little Shepherds, and a place in the dark corners of public imagination. The horror started when he attempted to kill his unrequited love, shooting her, then shooting himself, but failing to end either life. Once released a year later from a mental asylum, Vacher had a scarred appearance and suffered partial paralysis. He became a hobo, wandering in search of temporary jobs and begging for change, blending into crowds of wandering workers as he began a terrifying spate of random murders that ended when he attacked a woman gathering wood and was captured. After a confession to 11 killings in moments of frenzy, the killer was tried and executed by guillotine on October 28, 1898. He wore a white rabbit fur hat and shouted out bizarre statements during the trial and was physically dragged to the guillotine as he would not walk there himself. Number 2. Louis Darquier de Pellepoix. The Nazis are notorious for committing unspeakable war crimes targeted at Jews and many other identifiable groups. Yet some of the darkest perpetrators of war crimes complicit in World War II atrocities were, in fact, French. A notorious promoter of brutal crimes against humanity, Louis Darquier de Pellepoix was a French World War I veteran missing an arm and an eye, and also any vestige of humanity in his person. Active as a proponent of French fascism and anti-Semitism, he was appointed by Nazi Germany as the head of the Vichy French Office for Jewish Affairs. An ingrained anti-Semite and collaborator with Nazi Germany, Darquier was a thug who oversaw economic Aryanism, which simply meant stealing from Jewish businesses, and he also carried out the despicable work of deciding who was a Jew. Rightly derided as Hitler's parrot, de Pellepoix was a thoroughly unpleasant man with little going for him. He also accomplished very little of meaning personally, and then intensified the persecution of Jewish people through his agitation. In his official role, he acted on his prior statements, including a 1937 hate speech where he advocated for violence against Jewish people, including expulsion or massacre if necessary. Following the end of World War II, he was sentenced to death by the French High Court of Justice. However, an execution was never carried out due to his protection through residence in Spain. Number 1. Jean Leguay. A high-ranking official in the fascist Vichy French regime, Jean Leguay was the second-in-command of the French National Police at the time the German Nazi invasion and occupation was taking place. An especially dark-hearted bad actor, Leguay was charged in 1979 with crimes against humanity long after the end of World War II for playing a significant role in arranging the Vel d'Hiv roundup, which saw the arrest of over 12,884 Jewish people, including 4,051 children, who were then deported to death camps. Disturbingly, Leguay was accused of persuading Germans to prosecute Jewish children as well as adults. Following the end of World War II, Legay gained presidency of London-based Warner Lambert Incorporated, a company since merged with Pfizer. After his time with Warner Lambert, Legay took presidency of Substantia Laboratories in Paris. French law does not put a time limit on prosecution for crimes against humanity, and in 1986, Legay was charged with crimes against humanity for the second time in his life. This time it was for his involvement in seeing 444 Jewish people deported from Paris to Nazi death camps. It is the debased and shockingly cruel nature of his deadly campaigns, as well as the length of time it took for him to even be charged, that is bound to outrage and cause one to question the efficacy of justice in bringing down former war criminals. Legay died from cancer in 1989 at the age of 79. Shortly after his passing, the judiciary stated that his guilt in committing crimes against humanity was beyond doubt. So I'm not going to ask if you enjoyed that video, but if you did at least find it interesting, please do hit that thumbs up button below, and don't forget to subscribe for brand new videos just like this every day of the week. Also over there on the right, some videos from the archives that you might enjoy if you enjoyed this one. And as always, thank you for watching.